Okay.
Awesome. So I am joined today by someone who I am really a fan of. I think you have tons of people who would agree.
Oh,
You bring
thank you.
light into spaces, you bring education, wit, and just clever fun. So welcome, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I am Mimi O. I am a sex worker. I create content for OnlyFans and other fan sites, and have recently made my debut into the professional adult video world. So, hi.
Congratulations, that's huge.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll probably dive into that soon. I want
Mm,
to do a quick pronoun check-in.
mm.
Mine are she, hers.
Same here. I go by she, her.
Awesome. So diving right in, because I think
Mm,
people want to know just like what is the life of a sex worker, etc. And especially more specifically, being who you are and how you exist in the world. So
mm.
my first question for you is briefly just tell us a little bit more in depth about who you are, maybe how you identify, things that you're comfortable talking about.
Mm. Well, I am a openly bisexual trans woman, uh, living here on the East Coast in Philadelphia. Um, I've been doing sex work for a bit over a year now. I started in July of 2020, I think was when I officially opened up like my OnlyFans account. Prior to that, I had been dabbling a bit in the NSFW community on Reddit. I had gained like somewhat of a following there, which like gaining a following on Reddit is like kind of a hard thing to do. And I had people asking for it. So then opened one up because it was pandemic times, didn't have a job. So I was like, let me get some income in somehow. And I had like at the time like a very good support system to help me out with all of that. Um, and then a year later, I mean, here I kind of am now. I've amassed quite a following, which has surprised me. I've gained over like 120 followers on Twitter. I've had quite a
120,000.
Yeah, 120,000. Yes. Did I say 120? That's not wrong, but um, and yeah, I've even recently have had the pleasure of a couple studios reaching out to me to be the first trans models on their sites. I'm not gonna name what sites right now, just because we're kind of figuring everything out, but that's very exciting. Kind of like a big thing that I really wanted to do once I got more into the sex work scene and everything was just kind of change how trans women are kind of approached in general when it comes to that kind of stuff, and how we're kind of marketed in a sense.
Mm, mm,
Because a lot of it for trans people in general, I mean, it's just very centered around trans women, but specifically trans women who haven't had bottom surgery.
mhm.
So it's very much just like I think I saw someone said like trans porn is basically if you're not a chick with a dick, you might as well just not exist.
I think I saw that tweet.
Yeah. So like part of like what I've been like wanting to do, which is why this like so like very validating with like the offers I've been getting recently,
Mm,
was um I don't know, just kind of showing how trans performers should be kind of just seen as synonymous with cis performers. Like there
mm,
really shouldn't be like I do understand why there is a separation, but also it's like there shouldn't be as much as I feel there currently is in a sense.
mm,
Like
mhm.
with with it being a big deal of like Brazzers having their first trans model, part of me just kind of feels like that should be kind of a norm of like sites having both cis and trans models across the board. Because it's like you kind of have something for everybody in that sense. And I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I don't studios like making money, you know?
Yeah, diversifying content to reach a wider audience.
Hmm.
Like, what's the problem with that? And plus, we're increasing
Yeah,
representation, which
exactly.
talk about a little later, but you're kind of already touching on that, which I appreciate.
Hmm.
I really appreciate your openness.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up and just kind of ask, so how is it navigating, I guess, being you in these spaces? And have you always been this open about who you are?
Um, it's definitely been kind of a journey. Um, a big part of it was that when I first started doing sex work and everything, I was very uncomfortable with who I am, and I was very uncomfortable with like my own sexuality and everything,
Mm,
and just being sexual in general.
mm,
And doing this has kind of allowed me to it's allowed me to appreciate my body more, and also has allowed myself to just be more comfortable with who I am sexually and as a person.
mm.
And
That's beautiful.
yeah, yeah, it's like it's one of those things where it's like I guess it's kind of like exposure therapy in a sense, where
Like a
it's like,
little like
yeah,
catharsis through the
mm,
exhibition.
mm, yeah, like I always kind of joke about like, oh, my OnlyFans is just me monetizing my like voyeur kink.
I love it. Relatable. I'm
But
like,
yeah, and
I'm here for it.
I don't know, I've always tried to carry myself in my transness has never been the forefront of my content. There
Mm,
were definitely like some early times where I kind of thought like, well, I kind of have to market myself that way, I kind of have to do that. But then as time has gone on, I've realized like, you know what? I'm just me. I don't like marketing myself like that. I kind of just see myself as like, I'm just like any other girl in this industry, any other cis girl or anything.
mm,
Just, yeah, maybe I was just born a bit differently, but it's like, I don't see how that really affects anything personally. And that's kind of just how I've continued to carry myself, both like in sex work and in my everyday life. I've just kind of always like, I don't really see, this is so weird to say, I don't really see myself as specifically a trans woman. I just see myself as just a woman, you
mm,
know?
mm,
Like I'm just a girl, you
mm.
know, at the end of the day.
And you're gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and so intelligent. I think one of the things that you're speaking to is the evolutionary process, that growth that so
Mhm.
many people hope to experience and come to, that moment that you've described of working through barriers placed upon your body, of being
Mhm.
a part of a system that wants to just market and capitalize off of you and
Yeah.
exploit you and fetishize you and say, this is all you are. And
Mhm.
you have just communicated to me, no, that's not just all I am. I'm so much more.
Yeah. Like I
It's
am one of
so beautiful.
I'm definitely one of the few trans performers, and this is like nothing to say this is bad that other trans performers do this. I'm definitely like one of the few that you see like doing like uh penile centric content, I guess is the best way to say it. I don't really do stuff that focuses on my front because A, I have a lot of genital dysphoria in regards to that. B, it's virtually useless at this point. It can't do anything. So I'm just like, well, you guys are going to have to get used to other stuff because I'm not adjusting, my hormones and my medications just, for your pleasure. Like that's my health. I'm not going to adjust that.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. And I respect that fully.
Mhm.
And truly, at the end of the day, this is your life,
Mhm.
and your bodily autonomy is 100% valid.
Mhm.
I love that. Are you okay if I ask you the next question?
Yes.
Sure, sure. So this kind of you just touched on, but I'm wondering how you go about establishing boundaries, either when you create your own content or when you a company reaches out to
Mhm.
you, or maybe someone wants to collaborate with you. And I know you just touched on that, but do you want to talk a little bit more about establishing boundaries, how important that is for
Mhm.
performers, for you?
It definitely is important to establish like very clear boundaries because there are people who try to take advantage of like kind of blurry lines, and then like when you try to call them out on it, they'll just be like, well, you never said we couldn't do this, you never said like explicitly no to that. So that's why I always find it important to just take it upon yourself to like take the time, have a conversation, you know, have a very candid conversation about what you are comfortable with. And like a lot of times a problem in the industry on the studio and like, you know, working for professional site side is that a lot of people feel very uncomfortable to do that just because uh, there are people who like there are directors and everything who are kind of like, I guess predatory is the best way to describe it. I'm not really sure what other word there is to use, but there are people who like won't listen to that, you know? And I feel like you know, I recently um, have seen like some tweets from a performer that were very victim blaming of saying like, oh, it's the performer's responsibility to tell the directors, you know, make it clear like what your boundaries are. But it's like, well, not all of these directors make it like such a safe space to be able to do that. I've been very fortunate that you know, the few directors that have reached out to me so far, I have had a space where I can talk about this stuff. I literally just had a call today with someone like discussing a future scene and what I'm comfortable with and boundaries and whatnot. And so, yeah, it's definitely important to have a clear and candid conversation about this stuff. It's something that's definitely easier when it comes to one-on-one collabs because it's individual people. It's like this is someone you're working directly with. It's not like a middleman or anything like a director is, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's like it's definitely something that's a lot easier to have when it's your own individual content and like working with another creator, I will say.
Mm-hmm. Mm. I love that. You have just touched on so many different things. And I think one of the things I want to highlight in response is you're absolutely correct that there are people who exist in the world in these industries that are predatory, that
Mhm,
do rely on the insecurity or naiveness or blurry lines that a lot
mhm,
of, I think, performers and a lot of people in general just kind of uh, aren't fully aware of needing to communicate for themselves. And when you
mhm,
have people who know that they can manipulate those situations in their favor, that is predatory. And I think
yeah,
it's absolutely responsibility on everybody's part to try to be ethical
mhm.
about how they enter these spaces, how we enter these spaces. And so I deeply appreciate you speaking to this and your experience.
Yeah, and that's not to say that like, you know, everyone is like that, but it's
Oh,
like it's one of those like case by case basis. You really have to like, you know, trust your instincts, trust your guts with kind of things like that. A good kind of thing to do is I recently did this with a site that reached out to me, but ask other performers who have if you know, if you get reached out to by a director or by a creator, look to see who else they've worked with and then ask those people like, hey, I hope this is okay, but I saw you work with this person and they recently reached out to me. I wanted to ask like what your experience was, you know? I think like a good rule of thumb is like ask three people who they've like who has worked with a certain site or performer who has reached out to you. You know, that way you can get a good kind of like small group of like I think that's a good number to get like a concise idea of like what it's like working with someone.
I love that. It's just like if you're going to be going to a doctor or getting surgery, you want to see results, you want to see reviews, you want to talk
Yeah.
to people who have seen that doctor before just jumping into that situation. I love that response. I think that is so helpful and beneficial for people. This is a completely different side note,
Mm-hmm.
but I love your bangs. Like, I just love
Yep.
them. I feel like
Yep.
it's a very just like you look, and I love it.
Thank you. I have like a bit of a hime cut, which I've been growing out because I cut it too far back, as you can see. Um, so that's been a pain. But then like my bangs themselves, I trim myself all the time.
I
I
love
just
it.
a day. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, this is kind of like a fun, more lighthearted question.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have grown and amassed such a following in such a short amount of time, I'm sure there's still a lot about you that people don't know. So, are you comfortable sharing one interesting thing about you that your fans might not know?
Um, Probably that I'm not very sexual in my day-to-day life, if I'm being honest. I'm someone who tends to have a very low sex drive
Hmm.
in person, which I think a lot of people would find kind of surprising given what I do. But it's also something that like I've talked with other creators about, and a lot of them are kind of like the same way of like, just because, you know, our job requires us to be sexual for a living, there are quite a few of us who in our day-to-day lives we aren't really like that. Like
Mhm.
it's no secret I'm like pretty nerdy and everything. Like I cosplay, I literally every day I'm just like I literally got a 2DS off Amazon the other day and I have been playing it nonstop since it came in the mail.
I love that that is your response. And just very quickly to relate, same. I want to retweet that. Like, I think that there's an experience I've had in my lifetime where wanting to be sexy
Mm-hmm.
or enjoying talking about sexuality, being confident talking about sexuality with people, or
Mm-hmm.
presenting myself in a way that is like sexually related online, it almost inherently builds this ideology to people that like I am just this like sex crazed
Mm-hmm.
maniac that can't get enough sex.
Yeah, which like nothing wrong if like like you are that person, but like the
True,
two they aren't
true.
mutually exclusive.
True, true. Yeah, I'm actually super boring and nerdy. Like
So am
I'm
I.
us- I'm usually reading research articles or I'm usually just like thinking about food all the time.
Yeah, my day-to-day life, it's just like playing video games and watching like SNL compilations.
Those are the best.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm obsessed. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I know that you are public about being in a relationship. Are you okay if I ask you some questions about that?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, I really focus on studying communication. It's what I talk about with most people,
Hmm.
aside from my life in the not safe for work industry.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I'm interested in you sharing with people is how does communication for you, how important is it? And what do you kind of prioritize in your relationship while being a part of a business, a lifestyle that I think many might feel insecure about balancing both?
Um, God, that is such an interesting question.
I know it's loaded, sorry.
It's fine. Um, I will admit, like, it definitely has taken us a while to get to this like kind of comfortable point that we're at now. Like, I won't lie. Um, but I think a big part of it is just like you just have to be open and you just have to kind of trust, you know? Like like I always let him know when I get reached out by someone for who wants to work with me, whether it's like a site or like whether it's just like a collab. And my partner, he's also in the sex work industry. Like he does the same thing as well. And so I think that's just like an important thing. It's just like being open, communicating of like, hey, someone wants to work with me. Mm-hmm. Or like a lot of times me and him, we work together with people, you know. A lot of times we're just kind of like, hey, we're a package deal here. So
I love that. I kind of feel like it's really important. And the reason I asked you this question in this specific way is because I think that's what a lot of people are curious about. They're like, what would I do in that scenario? And I think what people need to remember is that there isn't this magical world that we live in that is so far and so different from other forms of relationships.
mm,
What you've just spoken to is in every relationship issue,
yeah,
right?
basically,
Openness,
yeah.
trust.
It's just all about like, are you with someone that you can be open with? Are you with someone that like you can trust? You know? And like I'm very happy to say like our relationship is one where like we do trust each other like a lot. We both love and care for each other like very deeply and just continue to be open and continue to communicate and everything.
I love that. I literally love that. That is exactly how I think a healthy relationship
Hmm.
is. Like,
Yeah.
what
And
more could you
that's
want?
also not to say like, you know, there definitely have been times where one or the other like has definitely been jealous. But I think now we're at a point where it's like we don't really get like that anymore.
Mm, mm.
I keep looking out because he's just like sitting to the side right here.
I think that it's very understandable. And I just spoke with a friend of mine who I've known for years. He's
Mhm.
a trans man who's a DJ, very
Mhm.
interesting lifestyle, who's in an open poly relationship. And we just
Yeah.
spoke about how it's so incredibly hard to work through and unlearn things like wanting to be like the main. Like
Yeah.
I'm your one and only. I will fulfill all of your
Mhm.
desires. And it's like, well, wait, if we thought like that about friendships, we
Yeah.
wouldn't have more than one friend in life. So,
Exactly. And I think like a key thing to also remember is that like there doesn't always have to be an emotional connection when there is a physical connection.
And also, I think it's almost unhealthier to have like you hold that in, like, oh, that person's really attractive. I
Mhm.
can't do anything about it because here I am attached to this person.
Mhm. He just said like it's very unhealthy to also like hold that attraction in and like not really have a space where you can be open about it,
yes,
which like
yes.
I definitely do agree with as well.
I think that for me, I try to explain to people the way that I live, like because I fall in love with someone or because I think that someone is incredibly attractive, it doesn't make everyone else in the world
Mhm.
ugly.
Exactly.
Like there's still going to be other people who we find attractive. And I don't think that that should be like weaponized to hurt and harm relationships.
Exactly. Like there's definitely like other people he finds attractive. There's other people I find like, you know, attractive. But it's like at the end of the day, you know, the person we love and care for each other the most is each other. So like you know, finding someone else attractive shouldn't really matter as long as like emotionally you're still in it with like that person.
It's like art. You don't look at one painting and go, this is the best painting. Everything else is worthless.
Mm,
You see that there are multiple things that are, you know, attractive and good looking. That is totally different than someone's personality and what's inside them.
mm-hmm.
Like, I can look at it.
Check in. Do you want to move closer to the mic
Oh,
and say that?
I'm like, you should just
oh,
share it
sorry.
with us.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. So, like,
Here,
you
let
know,
me.
it's like it's like when you look at an artwork, you
Mhm.
don't look at one artwork and go, that's it. That's the most beautiful artwork. Everything else is trash. You know, it's subjective. We all look at different things, and we all have a different view. Like we could accept that I'm with someone and I love them. That person's also very attractive. Like
Mhm.
you're just saying that that's attraction. Like there doesn't like I think some people take that in as when I'm attracted, it means every part of me is wanting them. No, it's like no, what I see with my eyes visually is complimenting.
Mhm. It's kind of like you can appreciate the art, but
Yeah.
there'll still sometimes be like that one you connect with.
Look at how we look at how we judge and view celebrities. We we judge them and view them for what we see or what we perceive. We don't know their lifestyle and what's behind the curtains. And there's a difference between I'm a fan of that person and I'm like, oh, I desire them. Yeah.
That was a perfect analogy. I don't know if that's what an analogy is, but that was perfect. Very well said. Thank you for also joining us. You're welcome to stick around. Clearly, you're insightful. Now, this makes me think of, I mean, I was just out at a restaurant the other night and I was like, oh, the server is very attractive. And I'm like, oh, I want to compliment them. And I think it would be so much healthier to live in a society where I could be with someone who I have that deep connection with and look to them and go, oh my God, our server is hot.
Mhm. And I think like another thing is that like you don't necessarily need like an open or poly relationship to still acknowledge there's attractive people out there, you know? It's something that can still be done with monogamous relationships. It's just a
Yeah.
matter of like again, just having the trust, the communication, all of that.
It's probably just probably in the day it's just probably cultural things that we've.
Yeah.
It's the normalization. This masculine as a guy, the masculinity, like it's how you don't share your feelings. You don't like it's a hetero man will say you don't say that another man is attractive or looks good, that that's wrong. Like it's like generationally that's always been suppressed. Like you don't share that kind of mindset as a guy. And then this is a perception. This isn't fully true, I would think. But like then you see some women use that as almost like a social way of like a backhand compliment. Like they'll see someone who's not who they don't think it's a good look, but they'll say like, oh, don't you look so good? Almost like, look at this person. Like they use it almost as they weaponize it. So like even if someone were to say, oh, you look good, someone might perceive like, are they insulting me? Is this like there's this, we've we've suppressed being able to express ourselves truly. Like there's so much layers to it
True.
now. Instead of
And it's
just
like,
saying,
we got
hey,
two
look
women
good.
here who can also speak on that shit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off or be
Oh,
way
no.
but I'm agreeing with you and I'm hearing you and I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And then I'm also like, and you know what? There's so much societal and cultural pressure put on women to be the hottest, the
Yeah.
smartest, it's whatever. But women always, I think in US culture where I grew up, it is so wildly toxic and competitive. It's like even if you're my best girlfriend, it's always like, but who's hotter? Like at the end of the day, that's so toxic.
And there's even kind of like there's even a bit of that mindset in the sex work industry as well. There's people that, you know, they see other people as competition when it's like, why should it matter? At the end of the day, the government is constantly trying to like demonize us and make it harder for us to exist as a community. So like, why see others as competition? Why does it what does that benefit? What does that do for you? You know, like it can't be a community if we're all against each other. We can't we can't, you know, fight these like legislations and these issues against us if we're all just fighting with each other. You know, we kind of have to, you know, the best of us kind of do have to come together to like show and fight back and like, you know, bring the community together as an actual community. Because I mean, there's definitely are some people trying to represent the sex work community who maybe don't have its best interests or maybe don't know, like they have such a limited perspective of like the sex work industry.
I think there's, oh, sorry, did you want to share?
Oh no, like I know I agree upon that. It's just like I just think it's one. I hate this. Not think about analogy. It's like how all these campaigns about recycling, you know, like or like lessen your carbon footprint. The responsibility always seems to go, you know, like just like that. The responsibility. Why does it have to turn to
The
the sex work?
individual.
Is that, yeah, the individual, the sex work. The industry doesn't protect us. Like, you know, like the industry that pumps up all this out is the one who pumps out the toxicity and then makes it such a competitive thing. Yet it's down to the individual performer to be like, you know, we should really try to work together instead of being catty. And
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I just, that's, yeah, that's a, it's, it just, yeah, that's something sucks.
It really sucks. And I appreciate you both voicing your thoughts on this. I think it's important for people to hear from people in the industry what's going on, how this is happening. And I think that it's, for me, what I witness with many of my friends who are sex workers or in the industry, there's so much trauma that people carry. There's so much lived experience of, you know, dealing with rejection by society because you work in an industry that's really taboo and controversial, and it's like evil to a percentage of the world, no matter where you go. And it's also like really exhausting, like you just pointed out, to be an individual looking for employment or trying to be a part of a company or an industry that doesn't even really have your back at the end of the day. And it feels like while all of that is happening, so you have the individual who's definitely holding some trauma or whatever, maybe not, hopefully not, but for the most part, I think a lot of people do work in an industry that doesn't have your back. And then you're also expected to fight the rest of the world
Yeah.
that wants you to be covered up or like not doing this work. It's wild. It's too much. It's
It,
too much for the individual. And I think that's what makes me feel like both of your messages about working together is so important.
Mhm. And like not just working together, but like definitely having people representing us who, you know, are objectively good people and do genuinely have our best interests and like have kind of a broad perspective of like what goes on in the sex work industry, not just with like just one aspect of it, not just with like pornography, not just with like stripping, not just with like escorting, you know, like someone who maybe might have not experienced all of those or has worked in all of those, but at least, you know, has knowledge about like what goes on and like kind of different facets of the industry. Because I think that's a big problem is that like people really don't realize how broad like sex work, like what that all encompasses. Like that encompasses like, you know, pornography, you know, any type of like full service, sex work, prostitution, escorting, you know, camming is in there. A lot of people don't even realize that like stripping, that is something that is considered sex work, you know, or even having a sugar daddy. I've seen some people like include that under the sex work umbrella.
Yes. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that. I tell my students, I'm like, listen, if you're a broke college student and you've ever sold feet pics, that's sex work.
So I think like the one good thing about sites like OnlyFans and other fan sites is that in a way it normalizes a lot of that. It's that now you might be walking down the street and you don't know who might have a fan account. The person next to you at the grocery store might have thousands of fans, but they look like your regular old, generic housewife, or someone your neighbor. Like you have no idea. And in a way, I think it, there's it's a mixed bag, but I think that's one positive aspect is that in a way it normalizes it, is that like, now that there's more people involved with it, in a way there is certainly a bit of a lesser taboo
It
notion
creates an
to it.
environment to be able to like talk about this stuff more.
Yes. Yeah. What I've witnessed, and I know that it's, OnlyFans specifically is extremely controversial. And I know that most fan sites are, but they're what we have. And so that's what we have to kind of talk about and work with. And I think one of the things that I think of when you share that is it's created a space and an avenue for people who might not have ever felt like they could be in sex work or do some type of work like this, even if they just want to post bikini pics, like whatever.
Oh
But
yeah.
now it's much more accessible. And it's, I think, socially a little less like cringe or taboo if you say to someone like, oh, I have a fan account. I think 10 years ago, people would have been like, what? And now it's like, how do you think we got through the pandemic? The
Yeah,
government wasn't
yeah,
here
like
for us.
definitely created like, I guess, the groundwork towards like the road towards normalization, I guess is the
Yes.
best way to say it. Like it's definitely still like we're still definitely in like the early stages of being able to have this be not such a taboo thing. But
Hmm.
that doesn't mean like, you know, still have like definitely come a long way than like 5 years ago or even like 2 or 3 years ago, I feel.
Yeah.
I certainly think it's really helped with a lot of I guess I would say like more of like a kink or fetish, you know, especially say something like BDSM or bondage, or of people of non-binary or NB. Those there's that those are niches that would it's hard to find even in your regular porn industry.
Mm.
And I feel like at least this now gives more revenue, at least gives revenue to people in like someone who might have a certain kink. It's hard for them to find something in your generic porn space. This
Yeah.
gives someone an avenue to what they are looking for, and also for people to be able to express that too.
Yes. Yes. As a member of the kink community for years, I've gone to events and I've gone to educational events for the kink and BDSM community. And I think it's so important that we somewhat humanize the reality that many humans have an interest in exploring sexuality.
I, like it's a joke, but it's true. Like just like let's just even foot fetish. 5 years ago, someone would say I have a foot fetish. You'll be like, oh, what? You're a creep. And now, if someone say you have a foot fetish, they're like, oh, that's different. It's like it's nothing.
It's actually on the list of top 10 fetishes in the US. Like impact play as in like spanking. Well, we don't have to go through the whole list, but
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you were to go back 10, 20 years ago, if some average person would want to look for that kind of kink, it would be a very 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 small market. They would have to go for like you know
Tumblr.
or like you have to go back all the way to back like Craigslist, and then that at least this is so much like oh my god, like this has so much
Rest in
it's
peace.
so much safer, and like there's so many layers to it. It's like far better than what that was like.
Craigslist Backpage.
Okay, you're bringing up my past. We gotta go forward.
No. It's like if you look at a lot, I would think if you look at a lot of people who like on OnlyFans and everything, they probably have some experience with Craigslist.
And it's like, we joke about it, but it really does kind of suck that like places like that are gone, because they really did, I guess, kind of give a safe, specifically for full service sex workers, or like maybe dominatrixes or stuff like that. It definitely provided a safe space to be able to advertise those kind of services, and for people to be able to look for those kind of things. And that's kind of just like another part of it, with like, when you take away these avenues, it doesn't make things go away. It just makes it more dangerous for everyone involved.
So like being Korean, like outside the US, like people joke about how if you go back 10 years ago, like hooking up was so difficult. Well, in a lot of other places, that's even way more difficult, and it could be very unsafe for you. People forget outside the U.S. there's no thing like Grindr, or like even things like Tinder overseas would not give you the like if you gay, lesbian, bi, or any of that being outside hetero. It's like you have to go underground and risk yourselves to so many hazards to be able to perform or find your kink.
And I mean, you grew up in like this neighborhoods with like that happened in Korea.
Like the area I grew up in Korea, in Seoul, was the only area where I guess more of that sexuality was more open. And like that was like because that was like the only area where like people would not bat an eye. And if a lot of those people who lived in that area went outside anywhere, they'd have a very difficult time to do your day-to-day things, even going by groceries, because people would probably look at you, probably get picked on, or, people might say things that you don't want to hear.
I really deeply appreciate your openness and willingness to talk about the cultural aspect and your experience in Seoul growing up. And I think that's one of the most informing pieces of this conversation that I think helps us get a better sense of like how global of an issue this is, how taboo sexuality and gender are everywhere.
I mean, I grew up around them because my father was in the military, but people would be really surprised to find out, like, it's kind of awful, but I mean, some people probably join the military to open their sexuality because they get to go out to somewhere that's far away from what they're comfortable from, everybody they know, and they're like, oh, I could go out far away and that could be more expressive. I don't be judged. And that's a double-sided coin. It has some positive effects, has negative effects.
Yeah. I think that's very common here in the US with people from like the middle states. They try to go to like the coast states that are like bigger, San Francisco, New York City, these Los Angeles, these bigger cities that are a little bit more accepting. I'm not going to pretend like things are perfect here, as you both know. But it's very sobering to kind of remember that there are so many people still facing challenges and barriers to even things like just living their daily life, feeling safe. And I think that's also why I'm excited to have this conversation with you two, because you bring so much raw honesty and perspective to this conversation. So thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah.